So Ben Shapiro called for an attack on Iran on his radio show. Now, this is unsurprising because he's a loathsome neoconservative who's never met a war he didn't like. But I love that his audience turned on him. So let's take a look and then we'll break it down.
Be that as it may, the president calls it back. Now, it's his rationale that I have a problem with. And when he says 150 people were going to die and that was not proportionate, I don't know where this idiotic notion came from that if you attack the United States, we are supposed to be proportionate in our response. In fact, I think that's a terrible idea. The reason I think that's a terrible idea is because the United States actually tried something that was basically called proportionate response. It was actually called graduated escalation during the Vietnam War. It was a strategy put in place by then Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. And the strategy, which is elucidated by former Trump National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster in his book, Dereliction of Duty. The book is all about how Robert McNamara and the LBJ administration blew the Vietnam War by engaging in this graduated escalation. The idea was that we would gradually turn up the heat on the Vietnamese, on the North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, until they realized that we were very serious about this, and then they would back down. But that's not really how military conflict works. The reason that people don't want to get involved with you in military conflict is because they are afraid you will devastate them. Not that you will gradually turn up the heat, but that you will devastate them. The fact is that if Iran knows that they can trade basically an unmanned U.S. drone for nothing, right? The United States is not going to retaliate in any way. Do you think they're going to stop pushing? They like this. They're the ones initiating this conflict. The Iranians know exactly what the Europeans think of President Trump. They know what the press thinks of President Trump. And they are playing that to the hilt. That's what this is. All of which suggests that the president is going to have to take action here sooner or later. Truly. Now, the Iranians may be careful. They may be careful enough that they never shoot down an American manned aircraft, that they don't actually kill an American, that they just sort of keep this at a low level of boiling conflict, hoping that the Trump administration will back down. But that is not a good thing either, because sooner or later, they will do something that damages us enough where we do have to retaliate. If you want to stop this thing in its tracks, you do have to show the Iranians that if things get real, the Ayatollahs are not only not going to be in charge of Iran anymore, they are not going to be breathing anymore.
So first, let me show you the like to dislike on his own video on his own channel. Yeah, and you read the comments and everybody's like, fuck you. So there's a movement on the right now away from the neoconservatism of the George W. Bush and Dick Cheney era and towards a more paleoconservative vision like that of Pat Buchanan. Now, don't get me wrong, these are people who are usually wrong about a lot of other stuff. But at least in this very narrow area, even if it's not for necessarily the right reasons or with the right, philosophical breakdown, they still ended up in the proper position and will take our wins where we can get them. So this is people, even in Ben's own audience, who might agree with him when he talks about taxes, for example, or other issues. And they're like, no, you're wrong about this one. So I love that. That's the first point. But the second point is, so apart from just ideological differences I have with Ben Shapiro, and those are strong in their own right, he's also just full of shit. Like, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. So that's part of my, massive objection to him as this, like, political commentator with a massive following, is that he just doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about at all. So if you're talking about the situation in Iran right now, and you don't bring up the order of events, and you don't bring up the history, and you don't talk about the way it's unfolded, then, that's a lie by omission. So there's a lie by commission and there's a lie by omission. This is just a lie by omission. So maybe you should give some of the history of the region. So, I don't know, maybe you talk about the fact that the CIA overthrew the Iranian government in 1953 because Mohammad Mossadegh, who was democratically elected, said he wants to nationalize Iran's oil and have it benefit the people of Iran. And the CIA went in there and toppled him. Why? Because the US and the UK wanted to continue to get cheap oil. So we put in a dictator, the Shah, so the dictator would continue to give us that cheap oil. We wanted a US puppet to control a sovereign country. And that's what we made happen. And then it was as a direct result of that years later in 1979, it led to the Islamic Revolution, where you had a right-wing revolution, a right-wing takeover of the country as a direct result of a US-UK puppet secular dictator who was in control. That led to the rise because one of the only places that people could go where they felt like they could talk freely and not be spied on by the government was in mosques. So a lot of the organization for the revolution happened in mosques. So you had right-wing revolutionaries overthrow the government and take back their country. Now, do I support a fucking Shia theocracy? Of course not. Of course not. But you know what else I don't support, Ben? The U.S. toppling the democratically elected leaders of sovereign governments. What's your take on that? You for that one? So that's some of the history of it. Now, you fast forward till today. What happened recently? The United States violated the Iran deal first. Let me repeat that. The United States violated the Iran deal first. Why? We slapped sanctions on them when one of the only provisions that we had to abide by in that Iran deal was, don't put new sanctions on Iran. We went in there, we put new sanctions on Iran. Okay, that's one way we violated it. We continued to violate it. And the entire time, even after we violated it, you know what they did? They kept following it. Why? Because Europe was still in the deal. Europe said, we're still going to honor the deal. So Iran said, okay, fine. We're going to continue to honor the deal because, you guys gave us your word and you're following the deal. We know the U.S. is a rogue actor and acting like a terror state. But you know what? Fine. We're going to ignore them. We'll continue to follow the deal. The IAEA said, even as recently as last month, Iran was still following the deal despite the U.S. pulling out of it and repeatedly provoking Iran. By the way, part of what we did, we sanctioned medicine going into their country. So not only do we slap sanctions on them, the sanctions include on medicine. People have died because they haven't been able to get the medicine that they need. And then Iran sued and it went to the International Criminal Court. And in the International Criminal Court, they said, all right, United States, we get it. You don't agree with Iran. You want to sanction them. That's all fine and dandy. You cannot sanction medicine because it violates international law. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. So what do? We pulled out of the international court, we berated them, and then we continued to sanction medicine going into Iran. Let me explain something to you guys. That is economic warfare. Imagine China decided we're not going to allow any medicine to come into the United States of America. And certain medicines we can't get. And so people start dying as a result of it. What would our reaction be? Would it be to still follow a peace agreement that we had with said country? Is that what our reaction would be? You know that's not what our reaction would be. We would fucking be scrambling the fighter jets immediately. So now that's just the beginning of it. The other part is the U.S. says, oh, our drone was over international waters. Did you know? First of all, Iran says, no, it wasn't. It was in our airspace, first of all. Second of all, they warned the U.S. multiple times, get your drone out of our airspace, and then they shot it down. It's almost like the United States is trying to provoke Iran to do something like this so that we can then turn around, play the victim, and then mainstream media runs with it like we're the victim and gives you none of the context so that we can start another war that John Bolton has wanted for a long time, and Mike Pompeo has wanted for a long time, and Gina Haspel has wanted for a long time, and Dick Cheney has wanted for a long time, and Donald Rumsfeld has wanted for a long time. It's almost like they're wagging the dog and they're working backwards from their conclusion and they're looking for excuses to try to topple the government. And it's almost like we got totally lucky this time. That everybody around Trump and all of the mainstream media was begging him to start bombing Iran, and at the last minute, he decided, no, I don't want to do it. Now, the New York Times says it was because he listened to Tucker Carlson, which is like, whoa, okay, good. I'm happy that Tucker's talking in his ear about this issue then, because God damn it, that's important. But given the context of what I just told you, given the chain of events that led to this, given the idea that Iran says the drone was in their airspace, okay, Iran warned the U.S. multiple times. What the fuck are we doing even close to their airspace in the first place? Notice, he never even brings that up. He never even brings up like, well, hold on now. Why are U.S. drones anywhere remotely near Iran, in international water or in their airspace? It doesn't matter. Why are we anywhere near there? He doesn't bring that up. Why? because Ben Shapiro acts under the assumption we are the world police, international law doesn't apply to us, and we can do whatever the fuck we want to do. That's the premise he operates under. So now you know that about Ben Shapiro. Why would you listen to his sniveling, weaselly, whiny ass? You know, the Honorable General Ben Shapiro wants the U.S. to attack Iran. Why? Because he ain't going to be the one attacking him. He's not going to be the one that's putting his life in danger. He doesn't give a fuck. He's comfortable in his studio. He doesn't want to do it. He wants somebody else to do it. Chicken hawk. That's what this guy is. If you sincerely believe that they are a threat to us, then you're massively ignorant or you're a giant idiot, or both. You really think Iran is a threat to us? You really think they're a threat to us? Is that what you think? What are they going to do? They're going to bomb Toledo? Is that what they're going to do? They're not a threat to us. We're a threat to them. And by the way, that's how you can explain everything they've done along the way. They know the U.S. wants to overthrow us. Israel wants to overthrow us. Saudi Arabia wants to overthrow us. Every step they make, agree with it or disagree with it, they view it as protecting their own asses. That's it. Every step they make is, we don't want to get toppled. We want to be left the fuck alone, so we're going to act in accordance with that. If you don't understand that that's their motivation, again, you're either massively ignorant or you're an idiot. And perhaps Ben Shapiro was both. And the final point I'll make is this. He said they're initiating this conflict. That's what Ben said. Iran is initiating this conflict. Look at how dismissive he was of the idea that 150 people will die. You saw his reaction. He's like, well, what do you mean? Who says we have to be, proportionate in our response? He's not bothered at all by the fact that 150 people, he doesn't care. Now, I went after Ben Shapiro, what was it, maybe a year ago on Twitter, because he had written an article in Town Hall that said enemy civilian casualties are okay by me, and I tweeted that at him, and I said, dude, you're gonna try to morality police everybody? Look at the shit you said. You're okay with civilians dying for a political end. There's a term for that. It's called terrorism. So Ben Shapiro is a terrorist sympathizer. He says, hey, I don't care. Killing civilians, fine by me. They're enemy civilians, so what a contradiction. They're enemy civilians. No, they're civilians, so they're by definition not enemies, but he doesn't care. I don't know. They're over there. They're poor brown people. I don't give a fuck. You can kill them. And he said, well, I retracted that and I don't agree with it anymore, and I wrote an article saying that that's wrong and that's bad. Well, you just said now 150 people will die. And you don't give a fuck. You said, who cares? We don't have to be proportionate in our response. Nobody died in an unmanned drone that was probably in their airspace that got shot down. I don't care. You want to kill 150 Iranians? Go right ahead. 150. Doesn't bat an eyelash. Says, yeah, totally cool. Yeah, kill civilians. Flip that script, Ben. What if it was Americans? Hilarious that he thinks he's pro-life and he thinks he can morality police everybody. He scolds the left on a daily basis about being immoral and wrong. You're the last person who should, go after anybody on the issue of morality, because clearly you are deeply, deeply, deeply immoral. Even Trump is more moral than you. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, Ben. Trump is more moral than you. He really said they're initiating this conflict. He doesn't care that 150 people will die. And clearly he just doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's not giving you the full background. That even to this day, Iran is still following the nuclear agreement, as we slapped them in the face repeatedly, put sanctions on them, including sanctions on medicine. So there you have it. I've said it before, I'll say it again. For all those people out there who maybe, you're a conservative and this video popped up into your algorithm because you usually watch Ben Shapiro and now, okay, fine, I'll click this and see what this dude says. If you've already gotten to this point and you haven't hit the dislike button yet and rage quit the video because, somebody's criticizing, my fucking Weasley, sniveling little squeaky voiced god, you can reevaluate, right? You don't have to always be stuck at this low level of political analysis where you just kind of default to what the silliest, most incorrect people online say, Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder are almost never right about anything. Empirically, I'm saying. Not like, oh, it's my opinion as a lefty. No. I mean, even at the basic bare analysis of like, let's just look at the facts first, and then we'll, develop an ideology after we accept the facts into our worldview. They don't even get it right from that perspective, from like, what are the facts? So I just need everybody to understand that. You don't have to always be stuck at this low level of analysis where you think a guy like Ben Shapiro is smart when he's a giant fucking idiot. So there you have it. But at least according to the like to dislike, even his own viewers were like, you know what? Fuck you, man. Fuck you. With your willy-nilly approach to war. And by the way, Ben Shapiro, of course, was massively in favor of the Iraq War too. So that shows you, his foresight on issues like this. Perhaps we should stop waging illegal and offensive wars, and perhaps we should stop fucking with other countries. And we should actually abide by our peace agreements. Just a thought.